Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be doing part 2 of my top albums of 2018 type of thing. I already did part 1. If you haven't seen that, then that is also on my channel. It's basically, I split this into 2 parts. I have this part which is going to be talking about all the albums that came out this year that I enjoyed and all that stuff. And then the previous one, part 1, was kind of splitting things up into categories like, you know, best guitar performance or best production, best singles, and doing my top 3 albums for each of those just because I felt like it. But this is going to be part 2. This is where I'm going over everything that I listened to this year, basically. Now, first thing I'm going to say is that this list isn't really, it's ranked, but not, like, completely. Because I broke everything down into subgenres and stuff, because pretty much what I listened to this year was pretty much rock or metal or something like that. So I split things up into subgenres, so I have like a top albums for rock and alternative metal, I have a top albums for metalcore, I have top albums for melodic death metal, etc. I have those ranked from my favorite to my least favorite. So I have those all ranked from my favorite to my least favorite within each subgenre. And then I also have, there were some albums that I didn't hear all of this year, but I heard enough of them to be kind of interested in them and be like, yeah, I'll mention this at the end of the year. So for some of these, there are albums that I just didn't listen to all the way through, but I'm still going to mention them just to be like, hey, this is a cool thing. So that's pretty much that. So I suppose we will get started now with rock and alternative metal. This one is a little bit weird because it does have some rock and alternative metal albums in it, but it has a couple of them that I feel are a little harder to categorize. Some albums that were more like electronic metal that are kind of, or electronic rock or whatever, that are a little weird to place, but I included them in here because I didn't really know where else to put them. So at number 1 for this, I've got Breaking Benjamin, Ember. I really enjoyed this album a lot. It was a very good rock album. One of my favorite albums of the year, I would say, and one of my favorite rock albums probably of all time. Easily my favorite Breaking Benjamin album. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I haven't gone back to it a whole lot throughout the year. I went back to it for quite a while, like for a couple months after it came out, and then kind of recently I've been going back to it a little bit. But it is still a really fantastic album and definitely a good one to check out. Next one I've got is Become by Zardonic, which is an artist that I only discovered like a month and a half ago maybe. It's kind of like a mixture of metal with like just kind of electronic stuff in general, because this guy's a DJ, but he is very metal influenced. He is a big fan of metal. I think when he was younger he even played in a black metal band or something, so he's very metal influenced, but he's also a DJ and he incorporates that into his music, and I really enjoyed this album. I think it's really, really cool. Of course, stuff like this isn't going to be for everybody. You know, there's some people that, of course, will not enjoy the style of this album, but personally, I thought it was pretty cool and I really enjoyed it. Next, I've got Parallel Universe by the Enigma TNG. Much like the Zardonic album, this is kind of an electronic rock, kind of metal meets electronic kind of album that I thought was really enjoyable. I enjoyed listening to this album quite a lot. I would say it leans a little more on the electronic side than the Zardonic album does, even though the Zardonic album does still have a lot of electronic stuff in it. This one has a little bit more, I would say. So if you're not a fan of that, then this probably isn't for you, but if you're into, you know, electronic rock, industrial metal, stuff like that, you'll probably enjoy this. Next, I've got Helix by Amaranth, which was, again, it was kind of a difficult one to place in here, but I figured it kind of fits under alternative metal, I guess, so I put it on here. This, again, was an album that I did enjoy listening to. Amaranth is a band that I don't really go back to a whole lot, but when I do listen to them, I do typically enjoy their music quite a bit. Kind of the dynamic of them having 3 different vocalists. They have a female vocalist, who typically does a lot of the choruses and stuff like that. They've got a male vocalist, well, they got two male vocalists, but one of them does singing vocals, the other does screaming vocals. It's kind of interesting to see the dynamic between all three of them. Yes, it is a little bit of overkill maybe, but it still makes for an enjoyable listen and an interesting listen. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good album. Next, I've got the self-titled EP from Ledger. This is Jen Ledger's side project. Both her and John Cooper from Skillet did side projects this year, so that was kind of an interesting thing that happened, I guess. This EP, when I first heard it, I didn't really like it that much. Well, I guess my opinions were more mixed than really disliking it. I thought a couple songs were really good, a couple songs were not that great. I've gone back to it a couple times since then, and my opinion has kind of gotten more positive. I do think this is a pretty good EP. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever else this project releases, and I think if you're a fan of Skillet or if you're a fan of rock or whatever, then go ahead and check this out, you might like it. And then next, as I mentioned, John Cooper also had a side project, and that is Fight the Fury with their EP titled Still Breathing. My opinion on this, it's much newer than the Ledger EP, so my opinion on this may change over time, but I was kind of disappointed with it. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't really anything much more than that, I guess. If you are interested in seeing what Skillet could be like if they were maybe a little bit heavier or more on the metal kind of side a little bit, then I think this is a good EP to listen to. And finally, at the very bottom, and probably my least favorite album to come out this year, is Broken by Memphis May Fire. This is a band that in the past has been metalcore, and this album was just straight rock, which I personally don't think is a bad thing. I don't really view that as a bad thing, as long as it's done well. This album was not done well, so it's just very bland and generic. There's nothing, literally nothing interesting about it. There's maybe one or two decent songs on it, but overall it was just really bland, uninspired, and uninteresting. I literally pretty much, just because this band is important for me because they were one of my first metalcore bands I ever got into, one of the first bands I ever got into. Plus, I had heard about this album and I was like, I don't know if it's gonna be good, so I kind of want to find out. So I made myself sit through the whole thing, pretty much, even though I really didn't want to. Before the album came out, I didn't expect it to be very good, and I can't really say that it surpassed those expectations. Well, that's pretty much all for those. I do have 3 extra albums that I didn't really... One of them is a re-release, the other 2 I didn't really get around to listening to that much. So the re-release is Vessels 2.0 by Starset. I do really enjoy this album quite a lot. I think Vessels is a pretty good album. The Vessels 2.0 did somewhat disappoint me. There were some acoustic songs on it, which is fine. I'm always fine with acoustic versions, and they were all pretty good as well. But then it also included a couple remixes, which I don't really care for, and then a new song, which is actually a cover, that I really didn't care for that much. In my opinion, it is one of, if not the worst song I've heard from these guys. Not necessarily because it's bad, but it doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, kind of mixed opinions on the re-release, but the album itself I think is fine. And then the other 2 albums are And Justice for None by Five Finger Death Punch and Evolution by Disturbed. These are bands that I'm not really hugely into, but I do listen to them on occasion, I guess. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I think they're both alright. I didn't really get around to listening to either of these albums that much, mainly because Five Finger Death Punch I'm just generally not a huge fan of, but, you know, I heard a few songs from it, I thought it was okay. And then this Evolution by Disturbed, I heard the singles, really wasn't that impressed by them, but they were okay. So I figured I'd give those a mention. Next, I've got kind of just regular straight heavy metal releases, which pretty much I only have one here because it's a classic band that released a new album. I didn't really know where else to put them, so I put them here. So that is Firepower by Judas Priest. This is a really good album. I really enjoy this album a lot, particularly the guitars. I think this is probably the best album of the year as far as guitars go. It is one I haven't really gone back to that much, aside from a few songs. I have gone back to Evil Never Dies quite often, and a couple other songs occasionally, but overall it's not one I've returned to, but it is still a very good album, and I do really enjoy it. Next I've got Power Metal. There's only 2 albums here, and I do have them ranked, so I have my favorite and then my second favorite, I guess. I think both of these were pretty good, and that first one is Powerwolf with the Sacrament of Sin. This is a really fantastic album. This is, in my opinion, the best album that Powerwolf has done so far. It's really, really good. I really enjoyed it a lot. I came back to it quite often as well. Quite similarly to the Breaking Benjamin album, I went back to this a lot when it first came out, and then I didn't really go back to it that much after that, and then recently I started going back to it quite often. So, yeah, it's a really good album if you enjoy power metal or whatever, then definitely check this out. And the second one I have here is the self-titled debut album from Follow the Cypher. This is another really good album. It's a really cool new female-fronted power metal band. This is their debut album as well, like I mentioned, so they're a pretty new band, and they're quite good. I did enjoy this album quite a lot. There's a few songs I don't care for too much, of course, but overall I thought it was a pretty good album. And next I have Metalcore. There's 4 albums on here that I did listen to, 4 that I did not. Well, one of them I did, but I didn't include it because I didn't really remember too much of it, I guess. So, first up, I've got Holy Hell by Architects. This is a really great album, just right first off. It's a really great album. I've gone back to it constantly. It's an album that haven't been a whole lot of them this year, but there were some albums this year that I would consider to be very nearly perfect, and this is one of them. This is a really fantastic album. If you haven't heard it, definitely check it out. Next, I've got Episode 2 by Galactic Empire. This is a band that does metal covers of Star Wars songs, kind of metalcore style covers, and I really enjoy them being a big Star Wars fan. So, it's a really, really interesting concept for a band, not to mention the music itself is really cool. The performances are all really good. They do a very good job at translating the music from the Star Wars films into this very different style. And I really enjoy it a lot, and if you're a fan of Star Wars, then you should definitely check these guys out. Next, I've got Dark Skies by Fit for a King, which is an album that I really enjoy quite a bit. I enjoyed the singles quite a lot before the album came out, and I still do go back to some of the songs on this album on occasion. I would say it kind of grew off of me a little bit after it came out, because I absolutely loved it when it first came out, but it has grown off me a little bit, but I still think it is a pretty good album. Easily the best one by Fit for a King, if you ask me. So, yeah, it's a pretty good metalcore album, and I would definitely recommend it. And finally, in 4th place, we have All That Remains with Victim of the New Disease. I did really enjoy this album on first listen, but every subsequent listen, I started liking it less and less for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I can't really see anything wrong with the album, but something about it just didn't really work for me. I do really enjoy a few songs on this album quite a bit. Again, I really enjoyed it beginning to end a lot when it first came out, but I've tried going back to it a few times now, and something about it just doesn't work for me anymore. I don't know why. The 4 other albums that I would like to mention for this are Black Flame by Bury Tomorrow, which is a band that I think is alright. I'm not a huge fan of them or anything, but what I heard from this album was okay. Next I've got I Am by Sleeping Giant, which is probably more on the hardcore side, but I did enjoy this as well. I haven't heard everything from it, but I've heard several songs on it, and it's a pretty solid album, I think. Then I've got Revival by Light the Torch. This is the new band, I think new band, I might be wrong, that has the ex-vocalist from Killswitch Engage, Howard Jones. It's pretty good from what I've heard from it. Again, I haven't heard it all the way through, but what I did hear from it was quite good. And finally, I've got Winter Wilderness by August Burns Red. This is their second album of Christmas covers, or Christmas song covers, I guess. So, it's August Burns Red, it's their Christmas covers, it's gonna be good. So, yeah, I do believe I've listened to this already. I'll probably listen to it a little bit more as the month goes on, but just because it is currently around Christmas time, so I'll probably listen to it more as the month goes on. Next I've got Melodic Death Metal. So starting things off with that is the one album that I would say is my favorite album of the year, and that is The Alliance by Sitecore. I've said several times how much I enjoy this album, and I would say it is my favorite album of the year, even though I didn't really rank any of the other albums at all in general. From my favorite to my least favorite, this is the one album where I will say this is my favorite. It's a really, really fantastic album. I've gone back to it consistently throughout the year. It's a really cool mix of melodic death metal and industrial metal and stuff like that. So if you're into melodic death metal bands, or even bands like Fear Factory or stuff like that, then you'll probably enjoy this band. I really, really love this album. So I don't really know what else to say about it. Next, I've got The Burning Cold by Omnium Gatherum. This is a really good band. I haven't listened to everything they've released or anything like that, but I did listen to this album a few times. If you're into other melodic death metal bands like Insomnium or Bellacore, you'll probably enjoy these guys. I was actually kind of surprised that I put this album second place for melodic death metal, because prior to a few days ago, I would have had this like probably second to last. There's 5 melodic death metal albums, so I probably would have had this at like number 4. I listened to it again a few days ago, and I really loved it, so it just kind of went up the list a little bit, I guess. But it's really, really good. I really enjoy this album. I will say I'm not a huge fan of the vocalist for this band. I don't think he's bad or anything, but for some reason I just don't like his voice that much. Or as much as other vocalists, I guess. But everything else about the album makes up for it. The guitar work is fantastic, the melodies are fantastic, all of that. Next up, I've got Wolfheart with Constellation of the Black Light. Again, if you enjoy Insomnium, Bellacore, or Omnium Gatherum, then you'll probably enjoy this band. This album has a little bit more kind of a black metal influence, a little bit in some songs, but if you don't enjoy black metal, that doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy this, because it's very much still melodic death metal, just with a little bit of that influence. It's a really solid album. I haven't really gone back to it as much, but I do really enjoy it a lot when I do listen to it. Next up, I've got Into Zero by Rise to Fall. This is another really great band that I enjoy a lot. Their last album, End vs. Beginning, was fantastic, and so is this one. I'm not sure which one I would say is better, although I would say that their last album was a bit heavier than this one, but this one, Into Zero, is still very, very good. I enjoy it a lot. If you're into bands like Soilwork, or Early in Flames, or even maybe like Scar Symmetry or something like that, you'll probably enjoy this band. They're really, really good. And finally, I've got Land of the Ending Time by Suotana. This is a not great, but it was a pretty good album, I guess. I wouldn't say it's on the level of any of the other ones that I've mentioned, but it's still pretty good, and I did enjoy it. It does still have some good stuff on it, and if you are just looking for another melodic death metal band or album to listen to, then feel free to check these guys out, because they are pretty good. And again, I do have 2 albums that I didn't really listen to that much, but I still wanted to mention. First one is Morkritz Tid by Svavelvinter, or however you pronounce their name. This is one of the several bands that is fronted by Christian Alvestam, which in itself means this is going to be a good album. I heard the singles from this and I thought it was really good. However, the one issue and the reason I didn't listen to it is because it's only available physically, and I would love to be able to collect CDs and buy CDs, but I don't have neither the money nor the space for it. So I didn't get the chance to listen to this album beginning to end, but it is, from what I heard of it, seems to be a very good album. And the second one is an album that I literally discovered like the other day, and that is Meditations by Cataclysm. So since I only discovered this a couple days ago, I haven't really had much time to listen to it at all. But I did listen to a little bit of it, and I thought it was pretty good. Next, I've got death metal. I've only got 3 albums for this. So first one up is The Misanthrope by Abysmal Torment. Again, a really fantastic album, one of my favorite albums of the year. It's a very underrated band, and if you enjoy death metal, then you should definitely listen to this album. It's really fantastic. Next, I've got The Sin and Doom Volume 2 by Impending Doom. This is a really good deathcore album. I this is the only deathcore album that came out this year that I heard, and so I could have included it probably in metalcore, but it probably fits more into death metal, so I just put it in here. I will say this is possibly their best album. I'm not sure 100%. It's probably between this one and Baptized in Filth, if you ask me at least. But I really enjoyed this album. If you don't already enjoy Impending Doom or deathcore, this album probably won't change your mind. But if you do enjoy Impending Doom or deathcore, then you'll probably enjoy this album. And finally, for death metal, I've got Deicide with Overtures of Blasphemy. This is a band that I haven't really got into that much, but I did listen to this album and I did enjoy it quite a lot. Overall, really solid death metal album. And the final subgenre I'm going to talk about today is black metal. So first up with that, I've got I Loved You at Your Darkest by Behemoth. I really enjoyed this album as well. Again, one of my favorites to come out this year. I don't know if I would say it's my favorite album by them, although it is still very good. It was kind of different from anything else they've released, which was nice. It was kind of a breath of fresh air, I guess. And yeah, if you're a fan of black metal or Behemoth or whatever and you haven't heard this album, definitely check it out. And next up, I've got Immortal with Northern Chaos Gods. Immortal is probably my favorite black metal band, and this is their first album they've released since, I believe, I want to say 2008, or around then. And so it's been a little while since they released anything, and this is also their first album without their longtime vocalist Abbott, who left the band a few years ago. He'd been with them for like 20 years, ever since they formed. This album proved that they can still be great without him, which is one of the main things I was concerned about with the album. But it ended up being very good. I did enjoy it a lot. Yeah, Immortal's a really great band, and they proved that they can still make great music. Next, I've got A New Kind of Horror by Amel Nathrak. This is another band that I got into relatively recently. I only really got into them at all like around September or October, very shortly before this album came out anyways. And I really enjoyed this album a lot. It's really, really good. Very chaotic sounding, but still very enjoyable for me to listen to. Next one I've got here is Transients by Shilma Gognar. I wasn't really sure whether to include this under black metal or melodic death metal because it is kind of melodic black metal. It could really fit under either one. If you enjoy melodic death metal, you might enjoy this album. But I decided to include it under black metal because the band overall considers themselves to be more of a black metal band, I guess, even though they can also be identified as melodic death metal or whatever. But it is a really good album. I enjoy it quite a lot. I've come back to it fairly often as well. It's a really great band, really great, very underrated band, and I really enjoy them quite a lot. Next I've got Aeonian by Dimmu Borgir. This is, again, a really fantastic album. Some people kind of argue about whether or not this band is really considered black metal anymore, because they kind of are more symphonic metal with black metal elements, I guess. But I still put them in here because I would say they include enough black metal elements to still be considered black metal, I guess. Again, this is a really great album. I enjoyed it a lot. I was kind of disappointed by it at first, but it has grown on me as the year has gone on. Pretty good, I would say. Has some of my favorite songs of the year on it, actually. And yeah, overall it was a pretty good album. And finally, I've got Back to Reality by Abstract Void. This is one of the most unique albums that I heard this year. It's kind of a mixture of black metal and synthwave, which is a very unusual combination, but I think it works very well in this album. I will say, even though I did enjoy this album quite a lot, I don't enjoy it as much as I feel like I could have, just because it is kind of repetitive. Once you've heard one or two songs, you've basically heard the entire album. It all sounds kind of similar, it all kind of blends together, but if you're looking for just a cool little album that's kind of unique, then definitely check this one out. So that is pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. What were some of your favorite albums of the year? Again, my favorite was probably, or I would say definitely, The Alliance by Sitecore. Really enjoyed that album. Out of all of those, that is my favorite. Let me know what you guys enjoyed this year, if you heard any good albums that I might have missed, or if I mentioned any album that maybe you had missed that maybe piqued your interest or something. Let me know in the comments, and also I didn't review all of these albums. this year. I reviewed some of them, but not all of them. So if there's any of these that you would like to see me do a review, then feel free to let me know that down in the comments as well. And that is pretty much it for this video, so I will see you guys next time.